history of firsts. For example, I would argue that it was Scotland that brought you America. Sure, James VI/1 was the King of Scotland, England and Ireland, but he was born in Edinburgh Castle to a mother and father who were born in Linlithgow. So yeah, but you get it, he's Scottish, cool. We've also had our hand in the invention of the television, telephone, radars, dimensions, penicillin, and even your fridge, and the list really does just go on. But one thing I was surprised to discover was that it was Scotland who had the world's first assassination by firearm. But okay, so first let's clear up some things. The definition. Assassination by firearm only counts in this context when the person murdered is a politician, monarch, key social or cultural figure. So right off the bat, yeah, definitely not the first literal assassination by firearm, as I guess that goes to someone in 12th century China. But this is the first assassination by firearm of a world figure that we have historical evidence for. With that said, it's liable to change, as with everything in history when you think you know something and some asshole goes and digs something out of the ground, but hey, that is just how it goes. But okay, I've dicked around enough. Why am I bothering you today? What delightful tale do I have to share with you this evening? That would be James Hamilton. James Hamilton was a 16th century supporter of Mary Queen of Scots. Mary Queen of Scots was a very unfortunate woman in Scottish history, and she will get her own video in my Stuart series eventually. But suffice to say, she was the only surviving legitimate child of James V, who died of an illness when Mary was just 6 days old. Mary was immediately crowned queen. As Mary grew up, it would turn out she was a Catholic, and worse, would also be forced to abdicate her throne in possibly one of the bleakest tales of women in recorded history. With all the incest, abduction, rape, forced marriage, escape, explosions, and beheadings, it really would meet all the criteria for being a solid episode of Game of Thrones. But alas, I did not want to spoil my own future videos, so Mary is abdicated during the middle of all that chaos, and her half-brother, James Stuart, also known as the first Earl of Murray, took over as regent for the young James VI. The only problem with the Earl of Murray was that he was a Protestant, and we all know religious difference, especially in history, often leads to violence. So that's where James Hamilton comes in. The supporter of Mary Queen of Scots, also a Catholic, didn't really like the regent's ideas of a Scottish Reformation. There's some more backstory here, like how in 1568 there would be a battle between Mary, who had previously abdicated the throne, and her half-brother, the Earl of Murray, at the Battle of Langside. What makes it strange that Mary was fighting to reinstate herself as queen, whilst the Earl of Murray was fighting to maintain the rights of her infant son James VI. Yeah, anyway, Mary brought with her 6,000 men, which included most of the Hamilton clan, and the Earl of Murray brought with him 4,000. It was a pretty one-sided affair, with James's army only suffering 1 death. But to be fair, Mary's army only had around 100 deaths themselves, but it didn't really seem like it took too much before those 6,000 men started to rout, which says a lot about the battle and how unwilling they were to die for that cause. What is interesting, though, is present at the battle, who was also captured no less, would be James Hamilton. In exchange for Hamilton's freedom, his estate was either taken away or burned down. To be honest, both have historical references supporting them, so go with whichever one you think sounds best. Anyway, what we do know is that in 1569, the Earl of Murray burned down Rutherglen Castle, an important castle for the Hamilton clan in retaliation for them siding with Mary in 1568. All of this really pissed off James Hamilton, who then decided to make it his mission to assassinate the regent. Apparently travelling to the borders, Edinburgh, Perth, Stirling, Glasgow, and even York and London, without a significant opportunity to do so. They acquired access to a Hamilton family building adjacent to where the regent was lodging. On January 23rd, 1570, Hamilton, hiding in a window, concealed by washing, shot and mortally wounded the Earl of Murray, with 1 or 2 shots from his brass matchlock carbine to the gut. As the regent staggered to get off his horse and retreated to his lodging, James Hamilton fled at the back on a horse. The regent would die that evening of his wounds. Hamilton was chased by some of the regent's entourage, but Hamilton managed to flee to the town of Hamilton, where the safety of his clan would ensure his protection until he left for France. James Hamilton would not be seen in Scotland again, and he would later die in 1581. In the aftermath of the assassination, Hamilton's uncle, the Archbishop of St Andrews, was captured, tried and hanged at Stirling Castle for his art and part in the murder. The captain of Hamilton, Arthur Hamilton of Meryton, would also be executed for his part in the murder in 1579. 5 other Hamiltons were arrested for their part in the murder, but all were acquitted or their lives were spared after the intervention of local lords. And that was it, the world's first assassination of a politician, monarch, cultural or social figure by firearm.